Yeah, no, great. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for being with me here today. As Lisa said, my name is Priscilla Andrews. I am the Director of Clinical Services and Programs here at the center. Prior to being in that role, I served just as a member of the clinical team. I'm a therapist by training, long time working with the cancer community, have been here for the entirety of my career. So really, happy to have you joining me here today. And hopefully you guys will leave here with some information that will help you feel more confident in your ability to cope with your diagnosis, regardless of where you may be in that experience. Perhaps some of you are newly diagnosed. Maybe one of you found your way here while you're even going through treatment planning. There could be some people that are here perhaps in treatment, or even people that are dealing with a recurrence or maybe with a chronic cancer. So I'm hoping that for everybody here, there'll be at least one nugget that you can take out of this that is going to make that experience just a little bit more livable for you. So with that, and I should say I will have the chat open. So as Lisa said, if you can hold your questions to come off mute until the end of the presentation, but if along the way you have a question or a comment that you want to make, you can certainly share that in the chat, and I will discuss that anonymously. So let's see, share my screen. Okay, here we go. Hopefully you're all in the right place, because otherwise you'd be quite startled to be hearing about how to cope with a cancer diagnosis. So let's just start off with like a baseline of the perspective that I come from, which is that while cancer is a crisis, it is a manageable crisis. Although in the immediacy of learning about the diagnosis, it certainly may not feel that way. There's such a flood of questions that people can have when they first receive that diagnosis, right? Worries about what's next, worries about the implication for your life long term, worries about how you're going to cope with it, how it's going to impact your day-to-day life, how it's going to impact your routine. And all of that really amounts to a whole lot of stress, right? So let's just like baseline think about how we respond in a crisis, how we respond when stressors are beyond the scope of what we may experience day to day. And I like to start here because our system is designed to respond to crises in a predictable manner. And my best guess is that when you recall maybe when you first heard you had cancer, maybe those days following, maybe starting treatment, that at some point along that way, my guess is that you can relate to at least one of the things that's up here on the screen, if not multiple of them, right? And if you have experienced one or more of these things, and I like to say, I like to normalize without minimizing, right? I want to normalize the fact that your nervous system was doing what it was pre-programmed to do in the immediacy of a crisis. Now, of course, the challenge is we'll want to be able to shift out of that crisis mode and to be able to cope with the crisis, right? That piece of it that makes it more manageable. And so the hope for me, the goal for me here today is that you will leave here either learning or having highlighted 4 broad categories of things that you can do to cope with cancer-related stress. I will just stay up front. All of these things are born out of research, right? Research that was done specifically for people who were newly diagnosed or dealing with a cancer diagnosis, things that were found to help make quality of life higher, help make stress more manageable, and also in turn lead to better health outcomes. So just know that this is steeped in literature that tells us, hey, these are kind of the core things that we can find that help people live better while living with cancer. I find sometimes when I do presentations about things that are about coping strategies, either people learn something new that they'd never even thought of, or they learn to like reconceptualize something that they were aware of, but they maybe needed more information about. And sometimes it's highlighting something that you may know and be aware of somewhere in the back of your head, but it kind of shines a spotlight on it so that you can be more intentional about how you utilize that strategy to help you cope specifically with cancer-related stress. So let's talk about seeking information as a way to cope. And I want to give a caveat here, is that information seeking can be tricky because there is a fine line between information seeking as a strategy to manage stress and information seeking as a behavior that we display as a result of stress. So what do I mean by that? Think about the difference between you've got a question, you go on the internet, right? You talk to your doctor. I mean, who doesn't use a little bit of WebMD, maybe a little ChatGPT AI thrown in there? Maybe you go to social media, you go to Facebook, you go to MD Anderson, you go to Memorial Sloan Kettering, you talk to your doctor, you message your nurse, right? There's all these different streams of ways you can find information. Using information seeking to cope is about having a understanding of the information that you're seeking, going to a reliable source for that information, and then feeling satiated by the information, or at least being able to put aside the question. What is helpful to be attuned to is information seeking something I do when I'm stressed? And the sign that it can be that is that you're getting feedback from the people around you that you're on your phone, you're on your tablet, you're on your computer too much, that you have a really hard time pulling yourself away from the websites, pulling yourself away from the posts on social media, pulling yourself away, that every question begets another question, and you are forcing yourself to stop with the information seeking. That may be a sign that the information seeking is letting you know that you're stressed. And so you may want to think about some of the other strategies in concert with the information seeking to help manage that stress. So one of the hard parts about a cancer diagnosis is the number of questions that you may be flooded with when you are first diagnosed. That as a frame of reference, to think that how could you be expected to know everything stepping into this new experience, right? Some people, I've met many people, I'm going to use women as an example, never been in a hospital other than giving birth to their children, right? Never really had a health crisis. Maybe did not have a front seat view to somebody in their life having a health crisis, right? Didn't understand how cancer was detected, didn't understand what cancer was on like a biological level, right? So there's so much nuance to what a cancer diagnosis entails, both from an experiential healthcare system, from an information processing, and from like just a biological understanding of what's going on in your body, right? So I say this to normalize how overwhelming it can be to try to process the onslaught of new information you're trying to take in, including the information being delivered to you from your healthcare team, but even just the information of how to navigate a healthcare system, how to navigate insurance, right? So one of the things that can be helpful with information seeking, one of the things that is helpful about information seeking is when we do it in an intentional way, it can restore our sense of control. right? It allows us to be more engaged with our healthcare team and so better able to make decisions. And even though sometimes information that we find can at first blush feel anxiety provoking, what research shows is that intentional strategic information seeking actually has the ability to reduce worry in the long run. So what do I mean by assessing about like strategic information seeking? Okay. The first thing when you're thinking about information that you need is what information do you currently know about your diagnosis and treatment? Now, for some of you that are here with me, maybe some of you are further in your diagnosis. And so some of this may not be identifying things for you to seek out. It may be reinforcing confidence and like, oh, like I do have a handle on some of this information. And it may also maybe help you fill in like some of the holes of where it might help me to learn more information. But if you're just starting off with a diagnosis, right, your knowledge around the diagnosis could be relatively shallow, right? Not everybody is an info seeker by nature. I know lots of people where like they just want to hear what the doctor has to tell them, and it's their family members, their loved ones that are going out and seeking the information. So thinking about what you know as it stands right now is a really good first step to assessing what information that you need, right? What do you understand about the diagnosis? What do you understand about your treatment? One thing that I don't have up here, well, I guess it goes along with the goal of treatment, but one of the things that people, when they start going out in the world and talking to other people with their diagnosis, or they're on a chat board or something, is they hear about other people having a different treatment plan than them. And so one of the questions that's not up here, but I'm going to add here is like, what prompted you to choose this particular treatment for me? Because my guess, now I'm not a medical professional, right? I'm a mental health professional, but my best guess is there's a pretty good reason why they picked your particular treatment over some other treatment that you might hear that somebody that you know was offered or suggested. So, finding out that information can kind of clear up some of the anxiety that can arise of like, well, why are they doing this? And I'm not doing that. So once you kind of take that inventory, then that allows you to think about what information do I need and what questions do I have? The inventory leads to the questions. Identifying the questions allows you to then determine where am I going to get that information from, right? So if your question is about side effects, right? Maybe long-term side effects, right? Cancer, unfortunately, is not a standalone medical issue. Oftentimes, you might have other chronic conditions or other medical diagnoses that you're managing, right? And so maybe you have questions that are about how about your cancer treatment might affect some other medical issue that you have. In this example, right, maybe you don't even have cardiac issues, right? But you're wondering, is this going to affect my heart health long term, right? No question is too big or too small. And the other thing I will say too is that you can ask the same question multiple times. What we know is that when you are receiving complex information in a crisis situation, right, your brain processes that information in a different part of the brain. So the way that information gets stored, by the nature of the way it gets stored, may limit how much information sticks, right? And so even if you asked a question once, does not mean you don't get to ask that question again. And you have a right to ask the question until you have an answer that is understandable for you. And one of the things that can help with that, with having communication with your healthcare team that allows you to ask the questions that you have while also ensuring that you really understand the information that is being provided to you and that the information is being provided in a way that is understandable to you, is thinking about this acronym of take part. I like a good acronym. So each letter in part stands for an element of a communication strategy that typically increases patient understanding of the information they're receiving, and also typically improves communication between patient and physician. So one is, and maybe this is something you guys have already done, is prepare to talk to your healthcare team. What does that look like? I write down my questions. Maybe I talk to my loved ones before my care, like my social support system, the people that are going to be there with the appointment, and we brainstorm questions. Maybe we think about anything that's happened since the last appointment that was confusing or that we want some more insight into, and we actually write those questions down. I actually recommend typing them up if you're able to, and even better, like printing them out and taking 2 copies, one for you and one for your healthcare team. Here's my agenda for the appointment. Because sometimes it's not that the physician, your oncologist, is going to be able to answer all of those questions themselves, but it sets the tone that I have come here with a purpose, and this is what I need from you and your team before I leave. And so even if there is a handoff, there is somebody on that healthcare team that'll be able to address the questions that you have going in. Obviously, the next part, you got to ask the questions. Just coming up with the questions and letting them sit there latent is not going to get you the information that you need. Now, the R is the part. When I'm talking to people, like, people are typically like, yeah, I think about questions. And of course, I go to my doctor with questions. The one thing that I think is novel that most people don't think about is repeating back to your healthcare team what you heard. Because sometimes things get lost in translation, right? Remember I said that information gets processed in a different part of the brain. So sometimes it's just the way the filter that it goes through in our brain filters out certain information and makes other information stick out. Sometimes there's a failure in communication. Maybe the doctor's talking at too high of a level, and it's like, I'm not catching what you're saying, doc. Sometimes with repeating back what you've heard allows the doctor to even yes and themselves. Maybe they realize that they've forgotten to add in an important piece of information. So what does that look like in practice? Like in practice, what that may be is saying, okay, so what I understand, Dr. Smith, is that I'm going to be coming for chemo once every 3 weeks. Before I have chemo, I need to have my blood work done. And then I'm going to talk to you after I have my chemo. And the doctor might say, well, wait, let me just make sure you understand the reason that we do the blood work is because we need to check your blood levels, and we need to make sure that your blood levels are where they need to be for it to be safe for your immune system for you to have the chemotherapy. And so there is a chance, it's not uncommon, that you may come for chemo and we may have to delay it until your blood levels have a chance to recover from the last chemo treatment, right? That's a lot of yes and that maybe the doctor didn't share, or maybe the way that they were explaining it, or maybe just like being overwhelmed by the information, it wasn't the piece of information that your brain most absorbed. It can also help when you have it repeated back. I mean, how many people have had a conversation and you and your partner have left the conversation with a third party and you both leave like with 2 totally different understandings of what that conversation was, right? I mean, that happens all the time between me and my husband. And a lot of times it's low stakes stuff, right? It's like our perception of what our friend was saying or how our friend was feeling. Right? That can happen in just like everyday life, but imagine that happens when you're dealing with something like a cancer diagnosis. And so that repeat what's been heard not only clarifies it for you, but can also help you and your support system that might be in the appointment be closer to being on the same page and not leaving with like 2 different stories of what was discussed, which can be anxiety provoking. It can cause disagreement, right? Distress related to that lack of coherence between you and maybe the person that's there supporting you in the appointment. And then the last thing of the take part is to take action. So if your healthcare team is recommending something, to follow up on that. The take action is also cycling back to that first part, which is it being this ongoing process of preparing for your next appointment. And maybe preparing for your next appointment happens 24 hours before the appointment. Maybe for some of you, it helps to jot things down along the way, so that you can remember those questions that come up. Maybe those questions come up right after your last appointment and they don't feel like they raise to the occasion of needing to reach out to your doctor on the portal, but it's sort of like, I'd like some clarification in conversation with my doctor the next time, so I'm going to be writing my questions down along the way. So, problem solving. Sometimes we have stressors that we cannot escape from, we can't get rid of, right? I think cancer is one of those stressors. We can do everything we're doing to manage the cancer, to eliminate the cancer, to get to a point of no evidence of disease, right? And yet there is stress related to the cancer, to having cancer, to worries about the cancer, right? That sort of, I can be doing everything possible to problem solve the cancer, and I'm left having to like manage anxiety around the cancer. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, of like, how do I manage that anxiety piece, that I'm doing everything I can and I still have this residual stress and anxiety. Sometimes there's problems we can actually solve, we can do something about. And I find problem solving to be really powerful, because even if we're problem solving around something that is not directly cancer related, that problem solving can ultimately free up some of your resources so that it is easier or more tenable to manage the stress related to the cancer diagnosis itself. Great example I love to give this, is I was working with a woman who had a younger child, like elementary school age. And of course, single mom, lots of stress around that, child rearing, her own diagnosis, like what it was to be worried about how she was showing up for her son, etc. And what she arrived at, she arrived at this on her own. So thank you very much, because now I can share this story, is she realized she had lots of friends that were offering to help, but there wasn't things that they could directly do for her son or directly do for her cancer. But what she realized was figuring out what to do about the laundry was taking up a lot of time. It took a lot of energy. It took a lot of energy and time away from her being able to spend time with her son, which was already limited because of the cancer and the fatigue from the cancer. So what did she do? When one of her friends said, "Hey, what can I do?" She said, "You know what you can do is you can help me with my laundry. I have this laundry service that I can drop off at. Can you come and pick up my laundry and drop it off and then bring it back to me?" And the friend said, yes, because the friend wanted to do something to help. It was very tangible, and it completely lightened her load. Right? And the completely lightening her load didn't mean there was not still stress around the cancer diagnosis. It just meant that there was more energy to put towards managing that stress. So, why is problem solving? What does research tell us that is the reason that problem solving is of benefit, right? It increases a sense of control, which can be lacking in the face of a cancer diagnosis. I don't think I've met anybody who chose to have cancer, right? That's out of your control. And so doing things that are in your control can be really, really helpful. It can reduce stress, obviously can lead to improved quality of life. And in general, when we use a strategic problem-solving strategy, I guess I shouldn't use strategy twice in one sentence. When we use a problem-solving strategy, it builds up a skill so that we become even more able to identify successful solutions when problems arise, right? It is both a strategic problem solving approach is both an end in and of itself, but it also is a practice that allows us to become better problem solvers. So what do I mean by being strategic, right? Being strategic, again, you're going to get these slides so that you will see this sort of stepwise process. And it really is a stepwise process, because when we are dealing with a problem that is causing us stress, we can tend to default to making like emotionally driven decisions because of that stress, and that can sometimes constrict our ability to problem solve. And so taking some of that emotion out by using a step-by-step process can be really helpful, right? So we want to define the problem. We want to come up with solutions based on how we define the problem. We want to pick one of those solutions, try it out, see if it works. And if it doesn't, we go back to step 2, because brainstorming, we've come up with multiple different solutions, so that if the first solution we tried didn't work, or maybe didn't work exactly the way we wanted it to, we have a list that we can return to. Now, when I talk about defining the problem, and here is an example, the questions on the left are the strategy to define the problem. And then I've given you an example of what that looks like in process. And I picked fatigue because it is so common for that to be a side effect related to cancer treatment. And it falls into that category of not being innately in your control, right? It's not a failing to have fatigue. It is a consequence of the treatment that you're doing to try to manage the cancer diagnosis, right? And so you're left with this side effect that can have a lot of implications on quality of life. And so when we're trying to define a problem, in this example, we're going to talk about fatigue, right? We want to really figure out what the facts of any problem we're looking at is, like the who, what, why, where, when, right? So in this example, right, we can define that it is this exhaustion, and it typically hits at noon, and I just hit a wall and I can't do anything else, right? We have a time, we know what happens, right? We know how it happens very suddenly. Then we want to, when we're defining the problem, like, why is it a problem? What makes it a problem? What are the bad results, right? And this is my example. If you have fatigue yourself, you may be running through this yourself in your mind and say to me, well, the reason that this is a problem is because, one of the things I love to do is get together with my friends to play mahjong, and they typically don't meet until 1 o'clock. And if by noon I hit a wall, then I don't get to see my friends, and I already feel isolated enough as it is. And now I have to cancel on my friends, and then I start to feel depressed, and then I'm at home, right? In this case, we could think about somebody who has kids. Why is it a problem? Because I can't be with my friends. I can't be with my kids. I don't have energy. I don't have energy to get things done around the household, right? There's some practical things. We can also, I think, imagine some of the emotional downstream effect of not being able to get things done that you want to get done, not being able to spend time with the people that you want to spend time with, right? So next step, how do I feel? Right? I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I feel like a failure. Now, one of the things that I think is really helpful at defining the problem is thinking about what other people would say about how you should handle it, because other people's ideas are not always great. And sometimes when we identify that within the problem, it helps us clarify another element of the problem itself, which is unsolicited advice, right? Well, you should just rest, take it easy, right? It's okay if your house is a little bit messier. That's their solution to the problem. But that's not maybe getting at the heart of the bad result of the problem, right? Resting, taking it easy, dealing with a messier house. For this person, if the reason that it's a problem is they don't get to spend time with their kids and they don't get stuff done around their house, taking it easy, resting, and dealing with a messier house is not going to solve what is at the heart of the problem, which is I want to be with my kids and I need my house to be in order. So then we also want to think about kind of like what are the like roadblocks, like what might be difficult about solving this problem. And, you know, for this person, because household tasks don't get done, that household cleaning is a problem. You know, I don't know about you, but, you know, we like things a certain way. It's hard to like seed control and get that over. Just naming the fact that we might run into a speed bump, right? I don't always like the way my partner cleans the toilet and then I want to go back and scrub it behind them. At least then we can be prepared and then we can take that into consideration when we're thinking about possible solutions. And then the big thing is, what do we want to have happen? If we solve the problem, what would be different? Now, this can sound at face value a little bit like some of you might be like, huh, never thought about it this way. Some of you might be like, well, like, duh, like, of course we've got to think about what the problem is and define it and what we want to have change. Running through these steps, though, is a startling experience because sometimes what we at first blush think is the problem or think is like what the bad result of the problem is. If we don't define that, we jump from what the problem is to a solution, we're actually solving a totally different problem. So I like to give examples if you can't tell. I was working with a client had a sibling was helping them out with their care. The problem at first, the way that my client defined it, had to do with when their sibling came over to help out, right? And it was leading to different solutions around like what day and what time of day and how frequently. But then when we actually got to the point of why it was a problem, what the problem was not the scheduling, right? What the problem was feeling a lack of independence and feeling like the sibling was overstepping and giving lots of unsolicited advice and expecting things to be done in a certain way and kind of bulldozing my client, right? If we had just jumped from the problem to thinking about solutions, we would have come up with really great solutions. I think when we started talking about it, we were like, have a shared calendar or, you know, put things on the calendar ahead of time. We came up with all these great solutions. And I actually think it was after trying those and coming back and realizing it didn't make things feel better that we really dug into like, well, what's really going on here? Right? So defining the bad result is going to allow us to come up with more effective solutions or solutions that are going to better address what it is that needs to be changed. Right? Poorly defining the problem can lead to great solutions just ineffective for the problem. Just a word about brainstorming. That really is wanting to take some time after you've defined the problem to not just come up with one solution, which is what we typically do. I mean, it's what I typically do, right? There's a problem and here's what I'm going to do to try to make it better. And then what happens? Well, if I try that solution and it doesn't work, then it fails. It feels like there's, you know, obviously nothing is ever going to work. I'm going to catastrophize. I'm going to feel like I just have to live with this. I'm going to be upset that the problem didn't get solved. I'm going to feel stuck, right? Brainstorming is a way out of that stuck feeling. Brainstorming allows us to come up with a list of different potential solutions. And in a way where we don't edit, we're not worried about implementing them. With brainstorming, we're not coming up with an action plan. We're just coming up with like potential things that we could do to address the problem. such that when we're done, we can look at the list and we can say, oh, wow, I came up with like 6 to 10 different solutions. And I think these two are probably the best ones that I could possibly do. And I'm going to start with this one, but I know if this one doesn't work, I can come back to my list and reevaluate, because look at what a good job I did coming up with potential solutions to the problem, right? And I always like to say, like, at this level, nothing is stupid, nothing is silly, nothing is impossible, because sometimes when we come up with that silly solution or that thing that we're like, if we get too wrapped up in the action plan of it, we would not throw it up there. Sometimes just throwing it up there allows us to kind of yes and ourselves and come up with something that maybe is more accessible, but we wouldn't have allowed our brain to come up with if we just said, well, that's not going to work. And that's where that like build on identified solutions, right? You might come up with one solution and then be able to, like, a lot of times when I'm at this phase, like, people will come up with solutions that are like multifaceted, that involve multiple things. And so part of what we talk about is like, well, could we separate that into two different things, right? Like maybe the first solution is, you know, I'm going to have my husband and my kids, have a chore list. And it's like, okay, do you have a chore list now? No. Okay, so could one solution be those two things? Would one solution be talking to your kids about chores? Could one thing be talking to your husband about chores? Could one thing be about sitting down with your family and drawing up a list of chores? Right now we've got multiple different ways of coming at this. So if the first thing doesn't go quite as planned, we can come back and think of another way of approaching the problem. Okay, social support. I'll just say we have an isolation epidemic in this country. And there's like research, more and more research coming out about that. And as Barbara Streisand says, you know, what is it? People who need people, right? Like we are wired to need other people. And to feel isolated and not have people to turn to has a negative impact on our health, even under the best of circumstances. And so when we're dealing with a manageable crisis, but a crisis nonetheless of cancer, we really want to leverage our resources and be intentional about beating back that isolation and beating back having to shoulder everything on our own, right? And sometimes that social support is about emotional support, having people to turn to talk about what's going on, to turn to have a laugh. Sometimes that support is more about feeling like I have somewhere to turn, that if I'm too tired to go to the grocery store, I have somebody I can send to the grocery store and get me some milk, right? Lots of specific cancer-related benefits of social support, right? We know that it lowers cancer-related distress to have a sense of social support. We know that it actually leads to reduced symptoms and reduced experience of side effects to have the level of social support one needs. It's linked to better health outcomes, and obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but it is also linked to a higher mental health quality of life. So lots of good things that come with ensuring that you have the level of social support that you need. And I should note, some people I see have really robust social support network. Some people I see, their social support is something that they're building. And I will say that's one of the things that the Cancer Wellness Center can provide, right? We've got different outlets that people come here for in order to bolster their social support network so that they can better cope with the cancer diagnosis. So there's a couple things that you, like tangible steps that you can take around increasing your sense of social support or increasing your experience of social support. And it is this process of taking a social support inventory. And it involves a few different steps that I'm going to go over here. Again, you'll have the slides. So if you relate to this, you'll have some tools afterwards where you can go through this on your own as an exercise. The very first part of a social support inventory is just creating a list of people that you have regular contact with. And you can see that there's lots of different categories that people can fall into. Sometimes it's family members, sometimes it's extended family, it can be friends, it can be members of your healthcare team, it can be coworkers, it can be people in your church community, right? There's so many different people that we come in contact with. So when you think about making this list, you want to think about those people that you see, talk to, text, email, have some interaction with on a routine basis, right? The people that you see daily, the people that you see weekly, maybe the people that you see on a regular basis once a month, right? We're going to throw that list up there so that we can see who all those people are that you might be able to turn to or that you already are turning to for support. And then once we have that list, we want to pause and think about how close do I feel to each of those people. We want to create a closeness circle. And right at the center of that is you, right? The thing to keep in mind is that, and you can see this up here because you maybe read it before I'm saying this, is that oftentimes the label we give a relationship implies where somebody should fall on our closeness circle, right? So we may say, well, I have a romantic partner and that should be the person closest to me. And then obviously my sibling after that, and then my best friend. And then I've got this coworker that I talk to at work, right? That's sort of like what society might assume, what the preconceived notion might be of how close we feel to the different people in these categories. When we're doing a closeness circle, though, we want to think about, in reality, how close do we feel to these people? Because not everybody feels close to their partner. Maybe the cancer diagnosis came along at a time where you were feeling more distant from your partner anyway, or maybe the way you're both coping with the cancer diagnosis is causing you to feel more distant from your partner and you feel more understood by your best friend. You could have a sibling. So many times I see people who have siblings and, just because they're your sibling, we don't pick our family. So, sometimes that sister or that brother is not the one that we feel close to, is not the one that we want to confide in or feel we can rely upon. And maybe it's that coworker that we actually feel closer to than our sibling, even if we're seeing our sibling at family events all the time, right? The closeness circle is thinking about, for you, what is your experience of that relationship? And then once you have that down, you want to start thinking about the type and quality of support that you experience from people. So what I mean by type is there's kind of two categories of types of support. One is task support, right? They're going to help you by doing something. The other type of support is emotional support, right? They're going to provide help by talking to you, by being with you. Sometimes we luck out and somebody is good at both task support and emotional support. Oftentimes, people are better at one type of support over the other. And I'll get to that in a minute. I'll say more about that in a minute. So in addition to thinking about what type of support people provide, what type of support maybe you're going to people for, you also want to think about, when I go to this person, do I have a positive experience or do I have a negative experience? And what I mean by that is, my sister says she wants to help. She says, ask me for anything. But anytime I go to her and say, hey, can you drive me to treatment? She always has a reason that she can't go. or she never responds to me in a timely manner and then is like, oh, so sorry, I missed your text. Did you still really need me to drive you? Right? Um, or maybe it's going to the partner and I go to my partner for emotional support. And what I really need to do is just talk about how scared I am about, what if I don't feel better? And I just need them to hold me and be there with me. And instead, what I get is cheerleading. You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Right? So that's those are examples of negative experiences of support, right? I go and I feel unfulfilled versus positive, right? I've got that friend and they say, what can I do for you? And I say, can you bring a meal? And they're like, I will be there tomorrow. And they drop it off. And it's always something that I enjoy. And I can tell that they're like, anytime you let me know when you need me, I don't feel guilty about it. It feels good to have them come. You could also think about those people where it's like, I can say anything to them. I can say anything to them. Or maybe it's like, whenever I need to be cheered up, I can go to them and like, they just make me laugh. It's not about my emotions. It's just, they're funny. And it just feels like I get to be me and not be somebody with cancer when I'm with them. Right. What can happen is sometimes we go to somebody who's really good at task support, but we expect emotional support, or we go to somebody who could be really good at emotional support, but sucks at task support. So doing this inventory can really slow us down and help us think like, what is this person typically really good at? Right? If I'm going to the sister for the drive to the hospital, and I know like that sister is just kind of, maybe they're flaky or maybe they've got kids and they're just unreliable when it comes to showing up. But if I call them at 10 o'clock at night, they're going to sit there on the phone with me and they're going to listen to everything that I have to say. Maybe that what that becomes is, oh, my sister is going to be an emotional support person. She's not going to be a task support person. But that coworker is always going to be willing to bring me the meal when I need it. And so I'm going to go to them for task support, because what we want to do is just make sure that your needs for support are being met, right? It's normal for people to be good at one or the other. And maybe even if you reflect on yourself, maybe you even think about like, geez, I'm, what I hear often from people is like, I realized I didn't get it until I had cancer. I didn't get it, right? And maybe that's not you. I'm not saying that's anybody here, but people recognizing like, I think I used to be really good at task support, but like now I feel like I can be much better at emotional support for people, right? Or maybe some of you are like, I suck at task support. Like I never had it in me to like be the one dropping off a meal, but I'm way cool with like being the person to talk to my friends about whatever's going on in their life, right? You might identify for yourself. So I'm putting that out there to think like this doesn't just go for the people in our life, it goes for us. And sometimes reflecting on our own experience of how we show up for people can help us normalize like, yeah, and it's okay for the people in our life to have differences of how they show up for me. And again, at the end of the day, what I want for each of you is for you to have what those different needs are be met by a constellation of people in your life. Right. So when you do that inventory, that social support inventory, you've got the list of people, you've got the closeness circle, right? Then you want to go through each of those people and you want to think about like what type of support is the person good at? Is it positive or negative, right? So maybe, I think the other thing that you maybe experience or maybe you will experience is the people where you're coming up with something for them to do for you to take care of them. Right? I hear that a lot. Like, I got this friends, they don't ever really show up the way that I need them, but they keep wanting to do something. And so I got to come up with something for them to do, right? But perfect example is I got this friend and they keep They keep sending me the text messages about ways to manage side effects, and I don't need any more unsolicited advice, right? That's just another example of like, that might be more of the negative experience of support versus a positive experience of support. I've given a lot of negative experiences of support, and I hope that all of you are having positive experiences of support. I want to be a conduit to just normalize, like if it doesn't always feel that way, you're not alone in that. Okay, remember earlier I said I'm going to talk about that like leftover piece of the like cancer-related stress that we can't problem solve away. It just is how it feels to be dealing with a medical crisis like a cancer diagnosis and a medical crisis where like you have to keep going into the environment that the crisis is occurring, right? On a regular basis, you got to go back and see the doctor. You got to go back and have treatment. You got to go back to treatment even when you know it's going to make you feel crummy afterwards, right? So how can we help our system cope with that onslaught of stressors that we have to keep going back into? And that's where relaxation techniques can come in. So I want to sell you on, oh, you can see I forgot to change a title. Pretend that said, pretend that the top of that says benefits of relaxation techniques instead. Say I need to do a relaxation technique right now when I saw that I forgot to update that slide. So many different benefits of relaxation techniques that you can see here. Some of them psychological, some of them around like your mental well-being, some of them physical, right? Relaxation techniques have a dual benefit, both to help you physically feel better and also mentally feel better. Now, if the benefits of it don't sell you, then what I want to do is give you an idea of why. Why am I talking about relaxation techniques? Okay. Homeostasis in our nervous system means that we are in a state where our body can work optimally. Our immune system is working optimally, our respiration, our heart rate, everything is in harmony with one another. Okay. Now, when we have a threat, like hearing we have cancer, or going in for a scan or a test, or sitting down for a discussion with our doctor, or going in for treatment that's going to make us feel like puke, right? When we're in the face of threat, our nervous system is designed to respond to that and push us out of homeostasis into a survival state. And that survival state can either look like mobilization, which is like fight or flight. I've got to do something. I always like to say mobilization can be a physical experience, but it can also be a mental experience, right? I've got like, I call it the hamster in the wheel. I'm problem solving. I'm making lists. I'm going over information over and over again. If you can relate to that, probably your survival instinct leads you to be mobilized. The other side of it is immobilization, which immobilization can be, I'm numb, I'm having difficulty concentrating, I have like, it's hard for me to like think straight. There's kind of nothing going on up there. Or it could be like a real emotional heaviness. I feel like really sad. Right. Those are both signs. If that's like going on and on and on, and we can't get out of it, that's just telling us like our nervous system has received a signal that we're under threat and it is responding to try to help us survive. Adaptive response. Challenges is that we can respond with that survival instinct and then not know how to get out of there. And the survival instinct is intended for like short bursts. Think like we're being chased by a bear and we got to get away from the bear, and then our nervous system can return to homeostasis, right? So what can we do to return to homeostasis? In order to return to homeostasis, we need cues that tell us we're safe enough. Right? Doesn't mean everything has to be perfect. We just need to be safe enough. And what relaxation techniques do is it sends a signal from our body to that part of our brain that is causing this the survival instinct response. It sends a signal from our body to our brain that says, hey, Priscilla is safe enough right now. Thank you for the work you've been doing. We can go back to homeostasis. She does not need to stay in a survival state right now, right? When that flashed up, that my last screen said social support inventory, I had a flash of danger and I had to do a little something inside to be like, she's okay enough. Maybe some people are going to wonder why her slide was labeled wrong, but it's going to be okay, right? Relaxation techniques are a physical way of sending that message to our brain, in part because I always think this is super interesting. 20% of our nerves go from our brain to our body. 80% of our nerves go from our body to our brain. So if you think about like how much information is being communicated from our body to our brain to help us make sense of what's going on. So reset superpower, right? Just as an example of like, I think a accessible relaxation technique that we can all do, right? It's something that you've hopefully been doing this whole time I've been talking. We all need to do it to stay alive. Typically, we do it without thinking, but we can do it in tension and harness its superpower. And when we do that, it sends a message to our nervous systems to return it to homeostasis. What is it? Maybe you guys know. Da 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 da! It's breathing. Right? The reason that we talk about deep breathing and breathing with intentionality, like counted breath, or if some of you, like I have a smartwatch that will lead me through a breathing exercise. The reason that that's so powerful is that when we exhale, it sends a signal to our body to turn off that survival instinct, right? And so, and the other cool thing about it is with practice, we get better at it. And it's pretty cheap. I found, like, I think it's typically free. There's lots of different ways you can go about it. I'll include this in here as one option, right? This counted breathing technique. If you've ever done relaxed breathing before, maybe you found that like they'll have you, maybe you've tried counting for fewer beats when you inhale and then counting for longer with your exhale, right? The more we do it, the more accessible it becomes, the more effective it becomes, and it just offers a little reset to your nervous system. It's great to practice when you're not in a heightened environment where you're highly, like, you know, you're going to be more stressed out, because then you get practiced at it and then you can use it in real life, right? Think about like a piano recital, right? You don't just show up at the piano recital and sit down with the music. What do? You practice it. You practice it at home. You practice it a little bit here and there so that when you show up for the piano recital, you're ready to play. Well, breathing technique, deep breathing, relaxed breathing is the same, right? We're going to practice it at home. We're going to practice it in environments that feel maybe more safe for us so that when we get up on stage to do the piano recital, when we have to go in for the scan, when we have to head in for our blood work or have the treatment, it's going to be easier for us to access that deep breathing technique. Now, it's not the only option. There's all kinds of other things that we can do to help our body relax, right? Some of them are very intentionally body-based. Yoga, doing things like a stress reduction class, so like guided imagery or progressive muscle relaxation, Tai Chi, meditation, right? These are all things that are purposely connecting our body to our mind to in a very direct way elicit that relaxation response. There's other things that we can do that help with sending those cues of safety to our nervous system to help us move out of that survival response into a more homeostasis, relaxed state, safe enough. Creative outlets can be really powerful. Social connection, right? You can think about, I always think about my one friend, Jody, that like when I'm with her, I just feel more at ease. It just is the way it is. It's how she is. It's how my nervous system responds to her, right? And so thinking about the people in your life that you feel better when you're around them, maybe that's hard to come by right now, right? And so that might be cycling back to that social support piece of bolstering your support network as a way to help your nervous system relax, right? Joining a support group here at the center, finding a peer mentor. Many times people find that in light of a cancer diagnosis, they need to expand their social network because they need people in their life that are going through something similar to them around the same timeline that they're going through things. That may not be you, but if it is, I'll talk in a couple slides about routes that the Cancer Wellness Center can help with that. Okay, so what now? What do you do now? I've given you this like run-on sentence of these 4 coping strategies that I'm preaching can help with managing stress, that can help increase your ability to cope with your diagnosis, increase your confidence in your ability to cope with your diagnosis. Right? Number 1, think about what your knowledge base is for your diagnosis. What do you already know? What are maybe some of those like the holes in the Swiss cheese? Like, I need some more clarity, or I want to understand that better, or I need to know more because right now I don't exactly know what the next step is. And then talk to your doctor. And when you talk to your doctor, right, that 4-part process, preparing, asking the questions, repeating back what you heard, and then cycling back to the beginning of that, or taking action on what your healthcare team is recommending. Thinking about the stressors in your life, both about the cancer diagnosis itself, but also beyond the cancer diagnosis, right? Are there things that could benefit from some problem solving? And if so, going through that detailed process of like thinking through what the problem is, what the results of that are, what you would want to have be different, and coming up with some potential solutions to that problem before trying to do something to address it. Again, if we think about like there is a bucket that daily stress gets poured into, and we all have a certain size bucket, and cancer just like is like a deluge of stress that gets poured into that bucket. But if we can remove and create some space in that bucket by addressing some of those other stressors, it can make the stress of the cancer easier to carry, even if it's not gone away. Taking that inventory of your social support and going through those steps of the closeness circle and thinking through what are people good at, what's my experience when I ask for support, do I have some untapped resources, are there people in there that maybe if I adjusted what I turn to them for support, I'd have a better outcome. I have a friend, she would do anything for me. I was out of town, she dropped food off for my mom. I didn't even ask her to. But if I try to talk to her about something that's stressing me out, she will change the subject, right? She's a great friend, but she's always going to be a task support person. So I kind of challenge you, like, do you have task support people that you're going to for emotional support? Do you have emotional support people that you've been going to for task support? And what would it be if you recross those wires so that you were really getting what you needed from people that could really show up in the way that you need them to? And then also thinking about relaxation techniques. Is there a way that you can incorporate that into your daily life? Practicing relaxed breathing. If you look up like deep breathing techniques, you can find any host of options on YouTube. I think we'll be restarting a stress reduction class at the Cancer Wellness Center that teaches different relaxation techniques. So ways that you can also come to the center if this is something that's new to you and you've never done before, but are interested in trying it, and want to do it in like a low pressure environment where we get the cancer experience. As well as thinking about like things that you do in general to help you relax and rejuvenate, refresh. One thing I didn't say earlier is sometimes those things can get put on the back burner. So is there something that kind of helped you reset that got put on the back burner because of the hecticness of the cancer diagnosis that you're able to and would be helpful for you to bring back? Because even if it's not cancer specific, it's going to help you overall cope with the cancer. Now, what can we do at the Cancer Wellness Center, right? We've got those professional support services. So if you're needing maybe some more intense guidance around learning relaxation techniques, maybe you're trying to figure out your social support, or that's been a struggle for you, or your emotions have just felt really, really overwhelming and you don't know where to start. We have all kinds, we've got individual, couples, family counseling, we've got support for kids and teens as well. If you're wanting to connect with other people that are going through something similar to you, we have a whole range of support groups, groups that meet weekly, groups that meet bi-weekly, groups that are drop-in, groups that are diagnosis specific. There's lots of different options. Our intake coordinator, Alana, would be happy to help you get connected to one of those if you haven't spoken to her yet, or even if you have and it's something new. In addition to those groups, we also have social activities, things like canasta, knitting, mahjong, things that are really just about maybe not being in a situation where you have to talk about your cancer diagnosis, but just being in an environment with other people that you know are going through something similar. We also have lots of different health and well-being programming. This is the nutrition and healthy lifestyle programming. We've got a nutritionist on staff that does individual nutrition counseling, but then also does a whole host of nutrition programs. Maybe that's a little about the problem solving. Maybe you don't know what to eat, and it would be helpful to have some guidance on that. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, have a range of stress and relaxation classes that we offer on a weekly basis. Most of them are either hybrid or online, so try to make those accessible to people if you're not feeling up to coming into the center, but have opportunities if you'd like to be in three-dimensional space with others. And then just as you are here today, we offer lots of different webinars to get that information that maybe is helpful for you as you're navigating your cancer diagnosis. So I am going to stop share, and we'll just pause here to thank anybody listening to this on YouTube or after the fact for listening in. And then also